Hi, I am Dr. Evelin Molina Dacker, and I'm a family physician and menopause and sexual health expert. And I'm here to teach you a little bit about menopause. Especially talk about is the adrenals. Adrenals are another wonderful gland, and in some ways, they may be the most fascinating of all of the glands that we have because they do so much for us. I'm going to share my screen and show you a little bit about what I mean. The adrenals are located right on top of your kidneys. There are these little areas right here, and these glands do so much for us. The different areas, if you slice it in half, you can see that it's made up of two main areas and then all the layers in between. So it makes up a lot of different hormones and substances that regulate our body. The first one that's in the middle is like epinephrine and norepinephrine, and we've heard of these. These kind of go with the whole sympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve. We may have heard a lot about like the fight or flight reaction. When we're in that place of like stimulation, we secrete our epinephrine, which increases our heart rate, causes our blood to go from the brain into our body so that we could run or fight or do what we need. That comes from here. These peptides that are also in this area help with inflammation, and they help regulate inflammatory things that happen in our bodies. Then up here in this layer, the glomerulosa, is where our mineralocorticoids, and what these do is they regulate our blood pressure. Think of it that they kind of help our blood pressure and help our blood continue to flow. And then here in the middle, it's where we have our cortisol, which we know is our stress hormones. And they could go up, like when we're under a lot of stress. They also work with inflammation and help us kind of regulate our healing and a lot of other things, but we're not talking about that today. And then right here in this part, right in the middle, is where we create most of our testosterone. And did you know that when you compare levels of testosterone and estrogen side by side, regardless if you if you have a penis or if you have a vagina or ovaries or testes, regardless of that, we all have actually more testosterone than we have estrogen. Even if you have ovaries, you have more testosterone, but we just don't have the receptor sites that we could use the testosterone. People who have testes have more of those receptor sites, and that's why they develop into a penis and testes versus having ovaries and vaginas. So this is kind of a cross section of all the different areas of our adrenal gland. So I'm going to show you something that's really super heady and you may not understand because sometimes I don't even understand this and I need to look at it multiple times. And this is the pathways where we create our hormones. Did you realize that our hormones are created from our cholesterol? That's why we need some cholesterol. We just don't want it super high where it actually forms into fat and causes inflammation in our blood vessels. But we do need some cholesterol because cholesterol becomes progesterone as well as DHEA, which then becomes testosterone. So everything in this gray area occurs in our adrenals or in our ovaries or in our testes, in different areas of the testes or the cells of the ovaries. So we create this hormone called DHEA, which then through other pathways becomes testosterone. The testosterone then goes into the peripheral tissue as dihydrotestosterone. And a lot of this depends on this one enzyme, 5-alpha reductase, and how much you have and how well it works with how it expresses itself. People who have a lot of this and get a lot of dihydrotestosterone could have a lot of that acne that you see when your testosterone levels are really high. But then testosterone is what ends up becoming estradiol. And estradiol is the main estrogen that we have in our body. Estrone is another estrogen, and it's less prevalent. And then we have another one called estriol, which is mostly prevalent when we're pregnant. It is less, it's a weaker estrogen, and that's the estrogen that sometimes people use topically on their face, or sometimes if you don't want to go on like full on estradiol, we could have it compounded to use on the vulvar tissue and vulvar area. So again, FSH, I talked about earlier, kind of helps stimulate this estradiol. So what I'm saying here is that our adrenal glands are another place that really plays into our whole hormone system. And sometimes when we're under a lot of stress, we actually create more cortisol, and cortisol can actually help influence how much estradiol we have. When we have, when we take oral estrogen, like if you're on hormone replacement and you take it orally, it actually could help increase your cortisol levels too. And sometimes cortisol, people who have a lot of cortisol, they have a lot more fatty tissue. Sometimes they have a hump on the back. That's when your cortisol is too high. When your cortisol is too low or adrenal insufficiency, that creates another host of problems. You may have heard of adrenal fatigue. That is like when you've been so stressed out that you've used so much of your cortisol up that now you don't have any and you need extra cortisol. We got to be careful about that, because when I looked at, some studies, the studies are really iffy if it actually is a thing. There's so many things that play into that fatigue, especially when we're stressed out. As you can see, like our whole estrogen and hormone system all work in conjunction with each other in the way that we have energy, the way that we navigate our emotions and moods, our blood pressure, so much our, whether we have good immune system, inflammation, all of it really exists in this one little teeny area of our body called our adrenal gland. So lifestyle and knowing how to regulate your sympathetic nervous system all help us actually transition and do these transitions through our life a little bit easier. When I talk to people about, hormone replacement or if they need something, all of that is great and it works and it's important. But without all the lifestyle parts of it, without understanding how to moderate your stress or deal with trauma, it all comes into play, especially during this menopausal period. That's why I kind of see this as like an actually enlightened time. It could be really hard, but it also could be really enlightening. It almost puts everything that's going on to the forefront where you have to deal with it. And by dealing with it, especially if you have the support of a good practitioner who understands menopause and doesn't just slap on a patch or give you a pill, but actually someone who can take you through that process, through that transition, and understand how, the ovaries work and the adrenals work. That's where you're going to get the best outcomes. Otherwise, you're just putting band-aids on things. Anyway, thank you for joining me.